Hey everybody, welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 267, being recorded on September 4th, 2013. I'm Ryan Schrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malmontano.
We're not using our code names anymore. We have to reset the podcast one time.
It's only good for
Nor are we wearing watches.
The joke's only good once, but only the people that watch live got to see it before. So now all those people that are watching...
I am not willing...
You're not going to sacrifice your integrity as a comedian?
Take that extra step. I'm sorry, I can't do it.
Okay.
This is why you should be watching us live.
I told the joke twice in a row, kind of, in Spanish class in my junior year of high school. Never again.
Well, they were making fun of you then, weren't they?
You know, I used to have hair, and I was skinny and athletic.
When did you last have hair?
I was 23.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm past that, so must be good. Must be golden.
Okay, Frankenstein.
It was a busy week on the site. We had a couple of major reviews go out and lots of interesting news. Let's start with probably a processor release that a lot of people have been waiting for, and they may be a little bit let down on the results. This is the Intel Core i7 4960X. This is the release of the Ivy Bridge E processor. Now, it is still an LGA 2011 part. It still uses an X79 motherboard. Your motherboard, if you already have an X79 board, you'll have to have a BIOS firmware, UEFI update, UEFI, whatever you want to call it, to support Ivy Bridge. If you have a Sandy Bridge E system, you should make sure you get that update before you install the new processor because you'll have some issues getting that to work otherwise. So the 4960X is the flagship Ivy Bridge E processor. Just like they did with Sandy Bridge E, they're releasing it as a set of three. Maybe, and the Sandy Bridge E was the quad-core release a little bit after, maybe? I don't remember exactly. But the 4960X is, as I said, LGA 2011. It's 6 cores, 12 threads, $1,000 Extreme Edition processor. It's Turbo Boost technology. It's got 15 megs of L3 cache. All of this should sound very familiar to you because it's almost identical to what Sandy Bridge E was. The main difference, of course, is we have moved from the Sandy Bridge architecture to the Ivy Bridge architecture, which, to be completely honest, is not that dramatic, especially on just looking at CPU IPC standpoint. So, what are the other specs that I may have missed here? It's still quad-channel DDR3. Supports up to 1866 by default, but obviously you can overclock it after that. AVX and AES, SSE 4.1 and 4.2. And then maybe the other big feature, I'd say the primary feature of this is 6 cores instead of 4. And then the next big feature is the 40 lanes of PCI Express. And with this generation, it's actually PCI Express 3.0 certified, whereas Sandy Bridge E was PCI Express 2.0. Some motherboard vendors were willing to overclock those PCI Express buses to 3.0 speeds, and it seemed to work fine. But, oh, wait. We got some updates going in the... Got some benchmarks running in the background. There's some audio. You probably can't hear it. It's fine, Ken. So that's Ivy Bridge E. I mean, that's really all there is from a specification standpoint to it. The other parts the other processors they're releasing besides the 4960X are the 4930K and the 4820K, and those are exactly as they were spec'd on Sandy Bridge E, right? So the 4930K is still a 6-core, 12-thread part. It's got a little bit less cache, 12 megs instead of 15. Clock speeds go down 100 megahertz on top turbo frequency. But the price drops tremendously from $990 for the flagship part, the Extreme Edition, down to $555 for the 4930K. And then the 4820K, much like the 3820 before it, is a quad-core 8-thread part, less cache again, 10 megs instead of 12 or 15. Still quad-channel memory controller, but only a $310 price. Also, it's interesting, if you look at the bottom of this table, it shows the 4820K against the 4770K. The 4770K is that highest-end Haswell desktop part out there. And you'll see that the 4820K has a higher base clock. It has the same turbo frequency, same thread, same cores. It has more cache, double the memory channels, obviously a higher TDP, and a little bit lower price. But because it's Haswell versus Ivy Bridge microarchitecture, there are IPC differences. So my expectations is that Haswell 4770K will be faster than a 4820K pretty much across the board. except for instances where you're talking about like really high-end multi-GPU configurations, where really you're just taking advantage of the
Memory bandwidth?
Well, the memory bandwidth and then the extreme PCI Express capability of the X79 platform. All these parts are unlocked. They're all overclockable. Core ratios up to 63, so if you feel lucky, you could do that. Our results were less than that, as you would expect. With our EVGA motherboard, we were able to hit 4.3 gigahertz, and with our ASUS motherboard, we were hit 4.4. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So this was something I threw in this review. When we did Haswell review, we did clock versus clock. We compared Haswell to Ivy Bridge to Sandy Bridge, all running at 3.5 gigahertz, all quad core, and we saw what was the difference, in terms of actual CPU IPC, like the actual architectural improvements of these parts. And I did that here with the 4960X, with the caveat that the 4960X has 50% more cores than the 4770K, but what people like to do, I think, in these forums and when they're discussing which parts they're actually going to buy is, well, I can overclock my Ivy Bridge E to 4.3 gigahertz, and I can overclock my Haswell to 4.4, 4.5. What's that going to get me? How do these compare? And so some of these metrics, I think, will be helpful for that. For example, if we look at the Cinebench single-threaded results, you'll see here that the Ivy Bridge E at 3.5 gigahertz is, a healthy distance slower than the 3.5 gigahertz Haswell part. And it's, obviously it matches pretty much with the Ivy Bridge and then a little bit faster than the Sandy Bridge part, the original Sandy Bridge part. So it gives you an idea of kind of where single-threaded performance has gone and how Ivy Bridge E has a little bit of a detriment because it is a architectural generation behind. But when you turn on the multi-threaded test, you see the benefit of those 50% extra cores of the 6 cores versus the quad core. You see a pretty sizable jump, 37 to 38%, going from Haswell to Ivy Bridge E. Same thing with some TrueCrypt benchmarks, X264. The Ivy Bridge E is definitely coming out faster, but that is obviously because of the additional cores that you get on that part. So I don't know. I mean, the benchmarks are kind of where you would expect them to be. Single-threaded tests, Haswell is faster. Multi-threaded tests, Ivy Bridge E is faster thanks to 6 cores instead of 4. It is marginally faster, I'd say 5 to 10% over Sandy Bridge E, and anywhere from 5 to 30%, 40% faster than Haswell, depending on the application. Pavre being one of those ones that shows giant steps up in performance. TrueCrypt has pretty good performance increases, and some of our X264 and what's the other Handbrake median coding tests show the same kind of results. So the only other thing I tested in here that I thought was really worth mentioning, multi-GPU gaming. So what we did was we took 3 GeForce Titans, and we plugged them into the Ivy Bridge E system. We plugged them in with Sandy Bridge E and saw if there were any performance gaps and performance deltas. There were very, very minor ones in favor of Ivy Bridge E. If you look at our Bioshock Infinite results, like the average frame rates are almost exactly consistent, our frame rates by percentile as well. And then when you look at the frame times, very similar patterns to frame times there. A little bit jumpy, but again, we are looking at 3-way SLI. In Crysis 3, while they have identical, essentially average frame rates here at the 50th percentile, if you go down here like towards the 95th, there's actually a kind of noticeable gap there in terms of worst case frame rates. And you kind of see some of that on display here in the frame time graph, where there's slightly less frame time variation on that black line representing the 4960X versus the orange line that is the 3970X. Metro, same thing. Sleeping Dogs, very similar results there. So, Ivy Bridge is a little bit better, but it's not a world better. It's not even really a noticeable amount, I would claim in that regard. And then finally, what they did do nicely with Ivy Bridge E is drop power consumption pretty dramatically. You can see under a full load, the 3970X is actually 25 watts, using 25 watts more power than the new Ivy Bridge E Core i7 4960X. So that's actually nice. It's still obviously using a lot more than Haswell, thanks to the additional cores and the memory controller, but it's not nice to see that come down, at least for these workstation environments, potentially server environments, that kind of thing. It's an expensive part for the 4960X. It's not going to win any value awards in terms of performance per dollar. If you look at this graph here, this shows 7-zip compression, and this is the MIPS, millions of instructions per second per dollar, where higher is better. The winner here is the AMD FX 8350 Bulldozer at 111 there. And
it's not Bulldozer, for sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whatever. It still wins. Ivy Bridge E and Sandy Bridge E at the bottom of that list. But, you know, what do you expect? Same thing on Cinnabitch, same thing on X264. That's what happens when you buy a $1,000 processor, I guess.
So I ask you this.
You ask me. Go ahead.
I ask you a question.
You do.
Tell me no lies. Why is this a year and a half later after Ivy Bridge was released?
I have no idea. You know, that's
They got bored and just needed to release something?
It's kind of weird, right? I wrote in the review that when Sandy Bridge E came out, Sandy Bridge was still the top end architecture available. Ivy Bridge had not been released yet, and so Sandy Bridge E had this span of time where it was the top microarchitecture from Intel, and it happened to have 50% more cores, and it was more overclocking friendly. Now, when Ivy Bridge E comes out, it is months after Haswell has been released. Haswell is a much better architecture in terms of power consumption, in terms of performance per clock, I guess. And so the benefits of Ivy Bridge E, while they're still there for highly threaded workloads, are somewhat muted because of that. You know, I don't know why it took so long after Ivy Bridge is released to release this. I don't know if they just. I really have no clue. I really can't say. And I don't know if they plan on making the Haswell E release as long of a wait as they did Ivy Bridge E. So, I don't know. I got nothing on that regard. I would say that the 4960X is still, like, I gave it an award because it's the fastest consumer processor you could buy. They deserve credit for that. I would not buy this one though. I would buy the 4930. Obviously, for 100 megahertz less, you can spend $340 less. Which is a pretty sizable jump, considering you can overclock these at least modestly and make up that difference without a doubt, right? So getting 100 megahertz boost out of your 4930K will be no problem at all. So this is really a part for content creators, for those gamers that want to do triple, maybe quad SLI and crossfire configurations, that you know, want those native PCI Express 3.0 lanes. They don't want to use, you know, a Z87 that's kind of like Z87 natively doesn't support three-way SLI. You have to have one that has a PLX bridge in it in order to support three-way SLI. So there are a lot of other potential issues that come in with that. So there are still reasons to buy Ivy Bridge E, but there are a lot less reasons than I was hoping there would be, because months ago there were rumors going around that Ivy Bridge E was going to be 8 cores, 16 threads. Right, and that's what the consumer was going to get, the enthusiast was going to get. We'll still see that in the server world, obviously, but it did not come out for consumers, so that's a little bit of a letdown.
Do you think we kind of saw this before? When there's no competition for the high end, they just milk it for whatever it's worth.
Yeah,
and I mean, you know, business practice wise, that's fine. But you kind of make people angry. You stifle buying because, you know, it almost has an opposite effect.
Yeah. Because
you release something new and big, it's not that much faster than the old stuff. Why would you upgrade?
I don't know. You would think even Intel would be like, hey, well, let's try to sell as much of this as possible, regardless of whether or not they plan on making it long term or not. I don't really understand the huge delay for it. I mean, considering it's the same platform, the same guys, ASUS, MSI, Gigabyte would be able to support these processors on the same motherboards with updated firmware. Why they would have sat on Sandy Bridge E for so long and not released Ivy Bridge E, I don't really get it, unless there was some other market reason for doing it on the server and workstation environment, right? So they couldn't release Ivy Bridge E for the enthusiast and really just hold out for a long time on workstation server class parts. I don't I don't know. It
But
seems
then
like
they just stepped on
because
it with
they could
Avatar.
add features instead of just as well as performance. Because
Yeah.
how many people have been screaming for quick sync type support
yeah.
outside of kind of the constraints that Intel has been doing? I mean, yeah, we got AES, got a couple other things, but it just seems like I'm not saying they're lazy because they're obviously not. They make an awfully good processor,
Right.
but they are not working hard enough to give us a reason to upgrade.
I
mean,
think
why
you were
would
right.
you really upgrade your old i7
920?
20 whatever? I can't
Yeah.
remember the exact ones, but Sandy
Yeah, it was a
Bridge.
920, right? There's still one in my box right here.
The Nehalem.
Yep. Still running one
Yep.
here.
I don't know. It's disappointing in some regard. This is what happens. You mentioned at the beginning of your comment that it's when you don't have competition on the high end, this is what can happen. It's like, well, we don't really need to release Ivy Bridge. Let's wait until there's this kind of gap in the releases that we want and step out in that direction at that time. So I don't know. In terms of overclocking, I'm going to do what I mentioned this before we move on. In our initial review, I was only able to get up to 4.3 gigahertz with I think it was with the EVGA motherboard, and I messed around with it for a couple of days trying to get a little bit more speed out of it because I had been told from other people it's like we're seeing 4.5, 4.6 gigahertz on most of these samples that we're testing. So I was disappointed really to kind of peak out at 4.3 gigahertz, and that's at a 1.4 up to 1.45 volt setting, which is 1.45 is pretty high, and we're using a Corsair H100 water cooler on this. So I did finally, after the review went live on whatever day that was, yesterday. Was it just yesterday? Day before
All
yesterday?
your troubles
I don't
seem
know.
so far away.
That ASUS finally got me the firmware update I needed for the P9X79 Pro board that we had sitting here, and went ahead and did some overclocking with it, and was able to get about 100 megahertz faster, one more stepping on the multiplier up to 4.4 gigahertz, and that is with all the cores running, all 6 cores at 1.4 volts. So it was running a little bit lower voltage, a little bit higher clock speed, so that's good to see. So there may be some more room on Ivy Bridge E than I initially thought. Keep in mind that with all 6 cores running, the default configuration of the 4960X is to run at 3.7 gigahertz. So by getting up to 4.4 gigahertz, we're increasing that clock speed 700 megahertz with all 6 cores running, and we didn't have any stability issues there. So that's a significant performance advantage that you would be seeing, right? Running everything at 4.4 gigahertz. So this platform doesn't have, much like Ivy Bridge to Sandy Bridge, there wasn't a whole. It kind of actually decreased your headroom a little bit. I think that's the same thing here. The move to 22 nanometer helps with power consumption, but it doesn't necessarily help with our headroom in terms of power usage and performance. So. More on that, read the article at pcper.com if you want to see all the benchmarks and see all the pretty pictures of processors and triple SLI, Titans and stuff. But now let's move on and talk with Allyn about a new pair of hard drives that we reviewed with the Red brand from Western Digital.
Wait, Allyn actually finally got a pair?
Yeah, I got a pair. They're right here.
They're only
One's
2.5
bigger than the other
inch,
one.
but
They're a little, unbalanced. I don't know. So yeah, Western Digital has finally released a 4 terabyte RED. This was probably after hundreds of thousands of people emailed them, because we get a bunch of emails. Actually, I get a bunch of emails of people asking me, "Hey, is there going to be a 4 terabyte RED? Because I want to build an NAS and whatnot." Yeah, so it's finally out. People can finally, hopefully, buy the thing since it just launched the other day. And as far as spec-wise, it actually is pretty good. It's not a huge upgrade over the 3 terabyte as far as the speeds go. The seek times are greatly reduced. They're actually much closer to the seek times of the green compared to the 3 terabyte RED, which was like on the order of 20-something milliseconds. It was kind of up there and stuck out like a sore thumb on as far as the seeks being a little slower than the rest of the pack. That result actually, Ken, if you're looking for it, is in HD Tune. Yeah. So
Okay, hold on. Pause here, because Ken does not control.
Oh, you're driving it? You're doing
Yeah,
it?
get it right, man.
For the entirety of this
Bypass
podcast.
the man.
For the entirety of this podcast, it is I have been the one driving what's on the screen. See, look, here I am.
that's just because you've been talking.
Anyway,
All right, so HD Tune, what am I looking for here?
The bottom chart there is the red is in the 3 terabyte red is in the middle of the pack there, and you saw it sort of stuck out with 22.2 milliseconds access time, right? Well, the new red's actually both of them. So there's a 3.5-inch model, and there is also a new 1 terabyte 2.5-inch model, and they're both at around the same random access time. And if you scroll back up a little bit to the transfer rates, you'll see that the 1 terabyte 2.5-inch red is actually pretty speedy for such a small drive.
Is that abnormal for a 2.5-inch drive?
I mean, they're kind of speedy, but don't get me wrong. The Velociraptor is actually a 2.5-inch drive, right? But this is just a standard form factor. You don't need any special heat sink action or anything. It's just a regular.
You can put this in your laptop if you want.
You could, just as a single drive. I would recommend it for those RAID laptops if you absolutely want to have like a, RAID in a laptop,
right,
for your OS and stuff. Yeah, you could definitely do that. But I believe the primary purpose for this 2.5-inch model is not so much laptops as it is. First of all, there's a thing called a Drobo Mini, right, which is a little portable, small-sized Drobo that uses 2.5-inch drives. That up till now, there really hasn't been any kind of a NAS-specific 2.5-inch drive solution. So there you go. Now you can put one in there. Also, if there's like small form factor home theater PC kind of boxes, those things we're always looking at, like the NUC. Doesn't that take or that takes only an SSD, not a 2.5-inch, right?
NUC is an mSATA.
It's mSATA.
Yeah.
But there are some devices out there, actually a lot of devices out there that do take a 2.5-inch form factor hard drive.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a portable unit, right? Well, if any of those have 2 or more slots to them, you can put a couple of these RAIDs in there, and they'll work, as they should for a RAID.
Mm-hmm.
So the specs are pretty decent for the 2.5-inch. 3.5-inch was actually near the top of the pack if you look under IO meter results. For as far as random access and heavy workload kind of duties, it is at the top of the pack as far as the consumer-ish kind of hard drives. Once you get into the RE series drives, then they have sort of their own bracket a little bit above in performance. And then, of course, the Velociraptor is always standing on its own because it's a really, really fast-spinning, speedy little disk. So basically, as far as your low-power, RAID-type solution that runs quiet and is supposed to give you pretty good speed for a RAID, this thing's going to do pretty good. It's actually, if you think about it, it's actually really, really fast for most people's network-connected NAS type thing in their house. It's actually overkill, but it's good to know that you get that extra overhead if you do decide to put these in a device like one of the ones, Ryan. What do you have, that Promise 5-bay RAID?
Yeah,
Thunderbolt RAID, right?
It's 4-port Pegasus R4. Yeah.
Pegasus R4. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you want to fill one of those with those, you'll still get pretty decent speeds. Not solid state speeds, obviously,
sure,
but pretty good speeds. And the main key here is the price for this, because these hard drives have always been just slightly, $5 to $10 over the cost of an equivalent Caviar Green. So the MSRP, we don't have Newegg pricing yet, but MSRP is around $230 for the 4 terabyte model, which is a pretty good price. And the 2.5-inch 1 terabyte is $100. So 10 cents a gig. It's not bad. You can find some drives for cheaper, but not for much cheaper. So really, the choice is just more of a matter of, if you want to put them in a RAID, you should probably lean towards the red. Unless you want to go way overkill and spend more money and put REs or SEs in whatever your solution may be. But if it's just something sitting on your desk at home, you just don't need to go that overboard.
Hey, Alan, have you ever thought about being a human beatbox? Because you just have this innate rhythm when you talk about hard drives on the clock.
I don't know.
So, were any of the questions? So we had a couple. I noticed there were a couple of questions on this review that you responded to. Were any of them interesting enough to worth bringing up? Maybe something you didn't note in the text of the article that you wanted to bring up on the show.
Somebody asked, is actually the one that really sticks out is someone asked, have they removed the limitation of how many you can have in one server? And it's not so much as a limitation as it is just a guideline. But really, if it's just like a home PC or something that's just a home type thing, you're probably fine with Reds, almost regardless of how many you have. If you're going to have a huge, if you have like a rack mount chassis at your house for some reason, which I don't even have, but there may be some even crazier than me as far as storage goes. Once you put more than about 8 of them together, you start getting weird harmonic vibration kind of stuff going on.
Sweet.
Yeah, and I know this because I built a 40 bay 9U high, RAID at one time, and that thing, you could do that. You can actually like put your hand on the side of it, and it would sort of have like this harmonic, rhythmic, like every few seconds it would sort of have a little bit of a vibration to it, and then it would fade away. And unless the drives were correcting for that kind of a vibration, it could affect seek times.
So you're saying that you could create a resonance cascade and open a portal to another word if you have too many of these drives in one server?
So the RE series drives correct for that. They have accelerometers built into the PCBs, and if they detect a vibration, they actually correct as the head is sweeping. It'll either go further or not, or not as far.
I do that
to try to correct for the vibration. There was somebody else brought up, hey, there's other solutions like Snap RAID, Flex RAID. There's basically software RAID solutions.
Sure.
Other than or in addition to Windows storage spaces. And my point for that is, well, some of those, I don't really trust the reliability, because if something does crash with those and that was your only copy, there's no tools to recover that stuff. Unless it's something that puts the files on all the individual drives separately and hides that from you. And then if something fails, the worst case is you just pull a drive out and you just read the files back off, right? But most of them don't work that way. They have their own proprietary kind of stuff to them. Whatever, however the metadata is stored, however the blocks are distributed. Whereas with regular RAIDs, there are forensic tools out there where if the worst case scenario does happen, there's still something you can do to get it back, which I actually had to do to resurrect one of Ryan's RAIDs once.
We're not going to talk about that.
Well,
that was so long ago. I haven't killed RAIDs
at least in 2 months.
Knock on wood.
He's actually checking the status of the RAID as we speak.
I can't reach the wall.
But the point is, if Ryan was using like Flex RAID, he could it wouldn't matter if he sent me drives or not. There's really probably nothing I could do here even to get that back. Whereas he was using a somewhat standard RAID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the Western Digital RAID 3.5-inch, 4 terabyte, and 2.5-inch, 1 terabyte NAS hard drives. More benchmarks and commentary on the review at pcper.com. Next on the list of our wonderful pundits to talk with is our own Hoth Walrus, who wrote an editorial that went up today discussing AMD, its future, its current status, and I don't know, this Fusion logo that's been around for a long time.
I wrote this?
No, actually, I wrote it, but I feel bad for you sometimes, so I just put your name on it so you'd have something to talk about during the show.
Well, that's nice.
Welcome, buddy.
What did I say?
There is an inevitable shift coming.
Is it inevitably inevitable? Anyway.
So tell me about it.
Let's talk about AMD, shall we?
Let's do.
All right. I don't know. Okay, a couple of years ago, like 2008, 2009, they had that big thing, that splash, the future is fusion. And nobody had any idea what the hell it was talking about. Well, they kind of had an idea, but they really didn't know what it was going to be. And finally, AMD came out with their fused products of CPUs and GPUs. And everybody thought it'd be hunky-dory, but it's been a kind of rocky road. And then Rory Reid came in. Say that 5 times really fast. Rory Reid.
Is Hunky Dory an ice cream flavor as well?
I thought Baskin Robbins went out of business.
Oh, okay.
But anyway. So yeah. We look at roadmaps, and we don't really have any idea what's going on with AMD because we have kind of some divergence there. and some things that shouldn't be there, and things that should, and it's all very confusing. So essentially, I kind of broke it down by saying what has happened to the main workhorses, which is AM3 Plus, and then the Opteron, the C32 and G34 sockets, and kind of took a look at where AMD was going and how they're getting there, and how things like process technology is kind of getting in their way of their final area where they want to be. So essentially, I talked about AM3 Plus is going down the drain. It's not going to be supported much more than where it has. If you look back in like 2008 is when they released the original 790FX combined with the SB710 and SB750 South bridges. Then we had the 890FX, which was the same North bridge, but they added a new South bridge that had SATA 6G and 6 ports of that. Yep. It was probably one of AMD's first really decent I/O chips that they had put out. Then we had the 990FX and SB950, which is exactly the same as the 890.
No. It's a higher number, Josh.
It's a higher number, you're right. But down low, they're the same chips. New BIOS, sure. Same chips. And back when they originally released the 990FX, they canceled the 1090FX and the SB1050. So at that point, we should have realized, you know what, AM3 Plus, it's a dead socket. And it's a dead socket in that they're not going to really support it with chipsets. However, we've seen multiple iterations of products that have been supported by this now aging socket, namely Thuban, which was the 6-core Phenom 2s, the original Bulldozer, and now the Vishera products that are populating these boards. Yeah. But again, the roadmaps do not show anything past Vishera for kind of the high-end parts for AMD. And we kind of look and see something confusing here because they talk about Warsaw on the Opteron side. Now, Warsaw is a higher IPC. It's lower power. And when you put these things together, you figure this is a steamroller-based architecture as compared to Piledriver, which Vishera had, and Interlagos, which is the Opteron part. But they're not backporting that to AM3 Plus. They're just keeping it kind of in the Opteron area, and they're trying to move everybody else, including Opterons, because if you take a look at the board that Ken just showed, that's one of the Supermicro H8 SGL. It was released 2 years ago. It's had a BIOS update to handle Interlagos chips, but it's based on a chipset which is identical to the 790FX and SB750 Southbridge. So they haven't done a whole lot of work in improving their server chipsets to any great degree. I mean, that's a 2008, 2009 part. Who
it
does
looks like
this?
it's got 3 PCI slots.
Yes. Thank the Lord, because you got to populate those.
Sound cards, baby.
Exactly. Maybe even a PCI modem.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, so
what's
after
going
Warsaw,
forward?
I'm thinking Opteron is going to change dramatically. And we're getting to the next part, because AMD is obviously heading towards all APU all the time. And this is not a bad thing, except when you consider the software environment that they're currently working in, which is not... What?
No, I said you're right, and it's interesting because I wonder if they are holding on to these legacy CPU parts because that software change to support heterogeneous computing has been much slower than they expected. And so they didn't really have any plans to do anything else with those CPU-only parts.
Exactly, because it is simply a stopgap measure to keep them in the game without pissing off all their partners and having a product that is so out of touch with the times that they can't actually sell them. because
Right.
if you have an APU in the server, how are you going to exactly effectively use that without a lot of specific type coding with OpenCL, DirectCU, well, DirectCU not so much, but OpenCL, GPU type stuff, and it's a pain in the butt to do that. And certainly, guys like NVIDIA have taken CUDA, made it a little bit easier. We've got C++ AMP, but it's still non-trivial to program for heterogeneous computing,
Sure.
even when a GPU and CPU are on the same chip. You've got all kinds of issues. That's why AMD and the HSA Foundation have got the HSAIL, the intermediate layer, which kind of handles a lot of things in between the actual hardware and the software. They're working with the C++. It's going to have native support for HSA and Huma. Java, same thing. It's going to have native support for these, but these are not expected until next year. So to buy their time, AMD is trying to keep a foothold in the high-end desktop and in the server with both Opteron and the Share cores, but all of their work really is going towards the APU. We've got FM2 Plus that's going to be coming out here shortly. Kaveri, which is going to be beginning of next year. It'll be the first true HSA product, and you have to think that when they purchased SeaMicro, that they were looking towards an APU future, because, boy, we could talk about this for hours, or at least 15 minutes, and we don't
should
have that kind of time.
Right.
Oh Lord.
Oh, no.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Nobody got time for that.
If you look at core counts, when Opteron first came out, you could put 8 stinking Opterons on a server board and have pretty good performance because Hypertransport and NUMA. And now we've got single CPUs that have 16 thread handling capabilities and a lot of memory bandwidth. And they don't need these interconnects. I mean, certainly they use them. We've still got 4 socket motherboards that have that nice intertwining of hypertransport to give you decent performance. But who's really buying these kind of big iron boards anymore? I mean, why do you need to have a single board with 64 cores available to you? Am I doing my math right?
I do,
yes.
yeah.
And so what we're seeing is with SeaMicro is they've created a fabric that interconnects all of these, processors in a slightly slower way, but it still works, and it's not as big of a problem. So I'm wondering if AMD didn't get this SeaMicro and beef up their fabric to be able to put a bunch of APUs in a single card and a single motherboard and do that effectively, because you've got an APU with 6 threads and still a full GCN unit in there, and you've got 4 of them on a board. Cache coherency, things like that. I mean, they're all native PCIe 3.0 parts. They've got plenty of bandwidth, low latency, use this fabric. Why keep going with Opteron and Hypertransport when you can do something like this? So, yeah, I think essentially my basic point is AMD is going all APU, but the problem is they just don't have the process technology right now to be able to get this out effectively, especially for the high-end server-type chips. They kind of need 20 nanometer stuff to get 4 modules on with a full GCN unit for graphics and have that all in the heterogeneous type package.
Let me ask you one more question before.
You may ask me one question. Make sure it's
About fumigation?
No.
Okay, that's your question. Yes, my dog apparently is down here. She's afraid of lightning and thunder.
Oh.
So there you go.
No.
Anyway, next.
No, my question was, do you think AMD would be in a better position if they had not sold off their manufacturing arm?
No, because GlobalFoundries has been working very hard with multiple vendors and people to try to get their process tech maybe a little closer to Intel in terms of geometries, and they just haven't been able to do that. And I mean, they have partners other than AMD. And if you look at AMD's financials, they're not fantastic. Imagine if they're trying to keep up with Intel with these smaller geometries, owning these fabs, and having that overhead and trying to get that. I mean, it would have to be worse than what they are now, because GlobalFoundries is trying to stay profitable, and they're spreading the risk across multiple companies, not just AMD. And so if AMD was going at it alone, it would have to be a heroic effort to get their fabs to a point where, you know, they could still be competitive with Intel in just CPU performance. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It was an interesting read. I read it this afternoon before we published it. I encourage everybody to go check it out. It's on the homepage right now. It's called AMD's Processor Shift. The Future Really is Fusion. And if you're to believe the comments, this is one of the most well-written articles they've read in a long time. A fantastic
Obviously,
article,
these people
Josh.
do not read many articles
Nice
very
article.
often.
Very well written, Josh. What they didn't know is that I wrote it and put your name on it. So
Exactly.
I'll edit all those comments individually after the fact. Let's move on to some news from the week. We had a handful of things. We'll try to run through them a little bit quicker than normal. Let's do this. Microsoft shows off the Xbox One SoC at HotChips 25. Despite the ironic naming of this convention for the topic at hand, Xbox SoCs is the discussion. What did we learn about that is maybe most particularly interesting about this SoC from this event, Josh? Josh, are you there?
What if I'm muted?
What if you are?
What if?
I said, of the Xbox SoC stuff that we saw from HotChips, what maybe one particular item stood out as the most interesting and maybe something we didn't know or didn't expect?
You know, a lot of the stuff we did know about.
Okay.
I think what is most interesting is how they have integrated the 32 megs of ESRAM into the product, kept TDPs at a reasonable level, even though it still uses, DDR3 as the main memory.
Yes.
And it's, 256-bit. It's not anywhere close to the bandwidth of the Sony PS4 with its GDDR5. They still have that 32 megs of ESRAM on chip that can be shared in between the CPU and GPU. I think that is going to be kind of interesting in people's impression on how this will work. Certainly, it doesn't have as many GCN cores as the PS4.
Right.
They're also raising the clock.
So they boosted the clock speed of the GPU, and just
CPU and GPU. Yeah.
They did the GPU earlier, and just like in the last couple of days, they announced that the CPU portion was going to be increased from 1.6 to 1.75 gigahertz. Now, what's interesting is I wonder how much of that are they implementing like the AMD Turbo Core technology, and how much of it is that they've raised the top clock speed? How often are you going to be there? That's something that's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, they didn't give us that granularity.
No,
Arbiter is saying, hey, 32 megs of RAM is not going to really help, but that 32 megs is on chip. I mean, that's a huge, huge cache as compared to. I mean, it's like it's the jump that you saw. Well, maybe not you, but Anand and Scott with the GT3E.
Move on.
Yeah, but that was 128 megs, but it still had a significant impact on overall CPU performance.
And that was with software that wasn't really written for that, right? All the SDKs are specifically written for this.
This is stuff that Microsoft is working on day and night to get developer tools in hand to these developers that will really take advantage of that. And if you kind of take a look at the Xbox 360, it had 10 megs of this stuff, if I remember correctly, even though it was on a separate die. it still was allowed developers to do really interesting things.
Yep.
And more memory is more better as far as anybody is concerned. And having 32 megs of high-speed cache, essentially, is really fantastic for a CPU, because the amount of data that can be put in there as compared to, sure, you've got 8 gigs of memory outside of that, but when you have instructions that constantly rewrite small bits of data, that 32 megs is just huge, because your latency is much lower. The bandwidth is massive internally in that chip. So Microsoft they made an interesting choice, and I think that was kind of one of the more interesting things about the entire presentation, at least the one that caught my eye. Did you see anything that really...
Not really. I mean, most of it was about that onboard SRAM and kind of the actual... I don't know if we'd actually known how much cache was going to be on it before. And now all the information about the clock speeds coming out. It seems obvious that they're reacting a little bit to the pressure of everybody claiming that the PS4 is a more powerful system. But now we know the release date of the PS4 is November 15th, and the release date of the Xbox One is November 22nd. We'll be able to play them side by side and tell zero difference between them. So look forward to that. Jeremy, what do you know about interesting, exciting things from Cooler Master, like the idea of a stackable case series?
Oh yeah, if anyone wants to order a half stack of cases, you can definitely get it from Cooler Master nowadays.
So what does this do?
Well, I'm still puzzling that out apart from the extra cooling, but essentially the idea is I've got two, the 915R, which is a half-size case, and the 935, which is a full-size, except that picture there, you may notice that the top of that case looks a little odd. And that's because there is a 915R stacked on top of that 935.
Oh, man. Okay.
You can see beside that the artist rendition of one on the top and one on the bottom, and sort of a nice case sandwich. So it's interesting that you can expand your case beyond full tower specs if you want. On the other hand, if you want to go tiny, the one nice thing is that these are going to be relatively nicely priced, not ridiculous like some of the smaller ITX cases are, mini ITX cases are. But is it actually going to be useful to be able to stack these cases together? Is sort of the question. Because one thing I don't see are pass-through slots on the top and the bottom.
Yeah, hammers,
I assume that there have to be.
Fix that. Hammers will fix that for sure.
Oh, well, yeah, you got an angle grinder, you can fix almost any problem. But I think that if you wanted to, say, slap a giant radiator in the top mini ITX case, run your tubing up to there, well, you can actually have a case's worth of fans exhausting that radiator.
Wait, hold on. Here it is. Interestingly, the half-stacker cases, including the 925, have rubber grommets in the floor and top of the case to allow users to pass cables and or water cooling tubes from the other stacked cases. This should allow for some fun compartmentalization and water cooling options. So now
Legos for adults.
Very expensive.
That's why rubber.
Ken has been lamenting all week about how stupid of an idea this is. And I don't necessarily completely disagree, because can anybody think of a good use case for either, if we look back at this photo, the middle picture, the middle one here, or this one, this is my favorite, is the full, I bet you could we stack like 3 more under that, maybe, you think? You could go infinitely tall.
You're a wild man, Ryan.
I want to see this at QuakeCon next year, and instead of balls can stacking,
he has a few disk drives that he would like to put into a single computer.
That's true, Alan. Yeah. Would you duct tape your hard drives in here?
You got it. There you go. Put it down. Take it all the way down.
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, okay. Flip your thing back up. We're done talking with Alan now. I want to see at QuakeCon next year, I want to see, instead of balls can stacking, I want to see stacker stack stacking.
People can get together with their neighbors.
Right. How many units high can your Cooler Master half stack stacker stack? How many stackers could a stack if it could stack stacks?
Yo, dog.
I don't know.
How's your water cooling with that 8-meter long loop?
The volume of water in that would be impressive, and actually it would probably help out quite a bit.
I can only see this ending badly. Corsair announced a handful of new items at PAX Prime, starting with new Vengeance and Raptor series gaming headsets. In particular, the Vengeance 2100, Vengeance 1500 V2 updated, Vengeance 1400 Raptor HS40, and the Raptor HS30. And I'm not going to walk through all the specifications of all of these. Some are wired, some are wireless, some are red, some are blue.
Huge.
Are they big?
Some are 50 millimeters, some are 40.
Okay, so there we go. Some are as low as $49.99. Some are not as low
Some
as
say
$49.99.
that the top one. I can't
It's
think.
100
of it. I was going to go Top Gear.
The
But
Vengeance 2100 is available in September for $150, and then the Raptor HS30 is the entry-level analog gaming headset for $49. We have Tim wrote up a news post on that. Also, he wrote about launching new PC gaming peripherals, which headsets might be considered. But in this case, we're talking about the new Raptor K30 gaming keyboard and two new mouse pads, the MM200 and MM400. There you can see.
3 feet long.
Holy Jeebus.
wow, look at the size of that
pretty-
mouse
Yeah.
pad.
So the Raptor K30.
Imagine the stains that would acquire.
Easy. 37 inches by 12 inches. Has a micro texture surface optimized to allow mice to easily glide across the mat, Josh. It has a non-slip rubber base to keep the mat in place. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then the MM400, which is smaller than the MM200 because numbers, is about 12 inches by 9 inches, and it's the same type of surface, I guess, but smaller, in case you don't want your keyboard under it. So $20 for the MM400. How much is the MM200? $35 is all. It's not too bad. Ken's never bought a mouse pad before, so he doesn't know what we're talking about. And finally, from Corsair, Allyn, I want to know what you think about this. High capacity, high performance USB 3.0 flash drives up to a 256 gig flash drive with a 5-year warranty. What do you think about these?
Actually, I like the pricing.
Yeah, under $1 a gig.
Yeah, it's under $1 a gig for portable.
250 for 256.
Yeah.
Yep. $250.
What do you?
for-
Any guesses on performance or something? They mentioned they're talking about 285
They do. It's right
megs
there
per
in the-
second. I mean, is that
It's right there in the print. It's like 180 meg per second writes and 285 reads, I think.
what do you think they're using in that? This is we're looking at the Flash Voyager GS.
I have no idea.
They're
Excellent.
using demon adrenal glands.
That's the highest. I like this one, the Flash Voyager Mini USB 3. It's got a keychain attachment, which is kind of cool. Ken thinks it'll break. I think we can test that. They go up to 64 gigs in that model. And do they mention speeds there?
No.
Don't really
They start
say.
getting
More vague.
slim on speeds.
Yeah, and the Flash Voyager LS, which is one of those rotating ones, and they go up to 128 gigs. 128 gigs for $90. Again, no mention of speeds on those. So the 256 gig, I would like to have just because I don't have to worry about carrying around any of those portable hard drives anymore.
Yeah.
It's
I would
bigger than the
suspect
SSD in my laptop or my desktop, I think. I have a 240 gig SSD in my desktop.
They probably all go
Who
at
made
least
that,
higher than
that
100 meg per
first
second.
really big USB 3.0 drive?
Super
it was-
Talent.
It actually, no, it was actually just
Oh, the
essentially
OCZ
a SSD
Inyo?
drive.
The
Was it an
Inyo?
OCZ?
Yeah, I just was actually using that today to copy some benchmarks too for the upcoming trip. So I was thinking of I remember getting my first 64 gig thumb drive. It was from Super Talent, and it came in like a leather pouch. And I still use it. And the plastic finish on it was like what do you call that?
I know what Josh was talking about.
No,
No.
it was the Inyo.
No.
Hand it
This,
to me,
this
Josh.
was a USB
Enyo.
SSD.
Whoever you are.
Enyo.
It was the Inyo.
Enya.
The Enya?
The Super Talent one I had a wood grain finish on.
Come.
Josh, this is what you're talking about?
Here's the Enyo that.
Yes, that one.
And there's the working one. And here's the one that Ryan broke.
Yeah, I noticed you haven't fixed it and sent it back to me or anything.
Come
yet,
on,
so-
man. Allyn, get on it. What are you doing in your spare time?
It's been like 2 years. Yeah. Come on.
I'll fix it.
Is that 128 gig or 64?
I have no idea. Oh, let's see.
It says on the bottom.
128.
128, so it's this one. Okay. All right. So that's from Corsair from PAX Prime. we'll have some ASUS announcements coming up. What do you guys think about Microsoft buying Nokia? It's not a huge deal for us right now. Does anybody care?
Do we have a Price is Right fail horn sound that we can play for the?
No, it is not a fail horn. They are getting desperate, and both need each other to survive.
But I don't think it's going to work. Is my point. Just a hunch.
It's got to work better than not being married, right?
Well, true. But I still don't think it's going to be enough. I think there's too much far better competition out there.
Windows Phone is getting better, for sure.
Yeah.
Nokia was making the Lumia devices were getting better.
With the financial resources they have, this war chest of money could not turn around their software for phones and whatnot.
They have not yet, Ken points out.
Because you know what? They survived Windows ME and Vista.
They did.
And come on, they paid more for Skype than they did for Nokia.
Their war chest didn't work on the Zune.
That hurts. Is that true?
It was like 7.8 for Skype.
Oh my lord!
You know, another failing company which was making absolutely no money, and Microsoft just snapped it up.
They paid more for Skype than they did for Nokia.
So consider that. And Nokia makes a lot of cell phones. They have a lot of patents, and for that, it might help. If they're really smart, they can kick BlackBerry completely out by saying, well, seeing as how we're the ones running ActiveSync and we can write for that protocol, we might actually be able to set up something more secure than an Android alternative. I don't know if they're smart enough to do that, but if they did, they might find themselves at least selling them as business phones.
Yeah,
On the other hand, it might just go Surface Pro.
Not that big a deal for us, but will obviously be interesting to look at in the next coming. It'll probably take a year before.
And they also get their hands on a crap load of Motorola patents. Because Motorola and Nokia had a deal going together for 15 years. I think it started about 4 or 5 years ago. So that should be interesting.
What do you think about Kingspec and its 1 terabyte PCI Express SSD, Allyn?
It scares me.
No, you need to talk to Jeremy about that. Allyn doesn't know anything about storage.
It really does scare me.
What scares you about that? Look at that.
Here, let's ask Jeremy first.
Okay.
Jeremy, what scares you about that?
It's the pretty pink packaging that scares you, right?
No. It's actually a pretty decent RAID card. My concern is
how
that
can 6 RAIDs go wrong? Come on.
No. Well,
it's just 4.
It's a RAID. We don't know if it's a Death Wish RAID or a RAID 5. We don't know. It might be a RAID 0. In that case, I would be completely horrified to know that there were 8 J-micron controlled SSDs all in parallel, where any one that fails can cause the whole thing to come crashing down.
But it has a fan. They can't ever fail.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
and then
it means the moving air means it's good forever.
Well, that's
because
first of all, the moving air doesn't do anything to the SSDs on the back.
Okay,
it's meant for the controller, for the RAID controller, right? Second, they used an LSI RAID chip that's doesn't really scale very well when you put a bunch of SSDs behind it. It's either that chip's not scaling well for whichever chip they used, or just J microns just don't do that good on random access, which is also true. But it's to the point where there's 8 of them in parallel, and if you look at the 4K, they did post a quick ADO benchmark.
2.5 gig reads.
Well, yeah, it does. Sure, but that's like very large sequential data transfer, right? That's the speed for that. However, when you get down to 4K, like random access kind of stuff, like we've seen higher numbers for 4K in ADO, even for, say, like a 840 Evo from Samsung, like 1 SSD, right? So if you're looking for random access, and that SSD is also available in 1 terabyte, right? So you could get 1 terabyte for like $600.
I will read the quote at the bottom of this story that says, when asked for his thoughts, PC Perspective storage editor Allyn Malventano noted that the 8 J-micron driven mSATA SSDs in RAID is just asking for trouble. And the 4K random I/O offered by the drive is actually less than some single drive SATA SSDs on the market. Unfortunately, the LSI RAID controller is quote, a major bottleneck for SSD level random access.
Yeah. that controller that they used looks like
Is that an accurate quote, Alan Malventano from PC Perspective Storage Editor?
Yeah. It's either. I would hope that 8 J-Micron or 8 SSDs in parallel, even slow ones, would be better performance than what I see on the resulting benchmark that they posted.
It's good to dream.
So and the drive's like what between $2,000 and $3,000, something like that.
$2,000-$3,000.
Oh yeah,
That's a lot of dollars.
Yeah. I mean, compare that to right now. You can get a terabyte. Granted, you're not going to get 2.5 gig per second sequential out of it, but you could easily buy a pair of half a terabyte of the same model, put them in RAID on any decent Intel chipset, and they'll scale, and you'll get a terabyte or a little bit over a terabyte per second.
But wouldn't this, best case scenario for this would be like video encoding? 4K video encoding.
It would have to be
and storing.
I don't even think it goes through that much bandwidth for that kind of encoding.
I don't think so. And in my experience with video editing, high bitrate stuff, it's the biggest stress on storage is when you scrub along the video and you're trying to seek very quickly, which is not sequential reading, it's random reading. So depending on how big those issues are, if any of that would be brought up by the issues that Alan mentioned earlier in terms of performance.
So obviously this would not be good for you in frame rating.
No, maybe. For us it would be because we are doing capture that is consecutive sequential reads and writes, essentially. But it's also $2,000 and they didn't send us one. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Let's talk about the end of our news section here. A handful of things from IFA. Did anybody look that up, by the way?
Someone did. It's German.
It's German, apparently, because it happens in Germany. That's a good guess. So ASUS announces a handful of devices. I want to talk about a couple of them. This one, to me, is the most interesting. This is the ASUS Transformer Book Trio that comes with a Haswell and Atom processor built in. So this device is what they call a 3-in-1. It combines hardware from the Haswell architecture and an Atom Z2760 SoC. It's a tablet, notebook, and desktop experience. Now, stick with me here. So the Transformer Book Trio, as you see in this photo, is a detachable ultraportable notebook with the top portion includes the Atom SoC. So when you detach it, it switches to Android, and you're running Android on a Clover Trail platform. 64 gigs, up to 64 gigs of storage. It's a 11.6-inch 1080p multi-touch screen. When they are combined, you have Windows 8 on it, powered by a Haswell processor, Core i5, a Core i7, up to a 1 terabyte hard drive, and it has a button on there that you push that actually switches between the Android operating system and the Windows operating system instantly, it says. That's ASUS's words. Instantly switch between Windows 8 and Android environment by pressing a single key. And data is shared between the two units via the tablet's 64 gigs of flash storage. So that's already pretty cool, right? Now you have both these environments. It's got shared data. What can you really do with shared data on an Android tablet and a Windows machine? Maybe a little bit up in the air for now still, but it's kind of interesting. But this is even more interesting to me is when you detach the tablet, somebody's off, maybe your kid's off playing some Android game or something like that, the base station is no longer just dead weight. It actually, if you connect a display through mini DisplayPort or micro HDMI, it can be used as a self-contained desktop PC featuring Windows 8. Right, so all of the PC components are in the base station. All of the Android components are in the screen. So you could, in theory, hook this up to an external display and have a computer still if your kid stole your screen. What do you think?
It kind of reminds me of a Commodore 128.
What the hell is that?
It has a higher number, so it's better.
It was just where the computer was all on the keyboard. And it was kind of like...
Yeah, okay, yeah, no, all right.
You carried it around and it just had a keyboard on it.
Yeah. I mean, do you think this is something that people would be interested in buying? The idea of a tablet Haswell combined unit?
Who's going to let their kids take off with the tablet of the machine you're working on?
Well, say you got...
Here, take this, kids. I'm going to go and spend 5 minutes attaching this to my monitor, power supply, whatever.
There's no mousing device on the bottom.
Yeah, there is. Sure there is.
Is there?
Yeah, there's a touchpad on it.
Oh, there's a touchpad.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a touchpad on it.
But that's skinny. I want to see a high-end i7 in there.
You can
see
get
it catch fire.
It says you can get up to Core i7. I'm sure it's the ultra low voltage stuff.
You know what that thing would be ideal for?
No.
If you could stream
Skipping
it somehow
across the lake.
wirelessly to your TV and you just have the base unit sitting at your couch.
I bet it does have WiDi support. It would have to, wouldn't it?
I don't know.
Doesn't
Does it?
mention that.
No, so Ultrabook.
Truth.
If it were called an Ultrabook, it's not called an Ultrabook, is it? No. If it were called an Ultrabook, it would have to have WiDi capability. I'll ask him about that, because if it does, you're right. That would be interesting. If you had a
That'd be
wireless
really
display,
snazzy, right? You just leave it on the armrest of your couch, and you just have a touchpad and a keyboard. And
Really expensive for that, probably.
it'll probably be expensive. They don't have pricing or availability yet. But I thought it was pretty damn interesting. But let's move on to other stuff. They also announced the X102BA Ultraportable. This is an AMD Temash powered machine, actually the A4-1200. We've seen a couple of other devices announced with this. The HP
like one.
TouchSmart
Temash.
11Z. And what was the other one, Ken?
Samsung, I think.
Samsung announced something like in the last couple of days. No?
Last couple months.
Last couple of months. So there's a Samsung and there's an HP out there. This makes 3. Not a whole lot of them out there, which is kind of weird because I thought it was a really good part for these low-cost ultra portables. This is going to be an A4-1200 1 gigahertz part, Windows 8 10.1 inch, 1366 by 768 screen. You know, it's kind of modest specifications: 2 gigs memory, 320 gig hard drive, up to 500 gig, 33 watt hour battery, up to 5 hours of battery life is what it says. 1.1 kilograms, so 2.4 pounds. It's an interesting little device. No idea on pricing, but I would expect it to be relatively cheap. $500 or so would be my guess. What else do they have? Oh, the Transformer Pad. I hate these names. Transformer Pad TF701T, which is it's a transformer. That means it's a tablet with a dock. It's being powered by Tegra 4, though, which is interesting. And it does have an IPS-based 10.1 or 10.1 inch native resolution of 2560 by 1600.
That's dense.
It's dense. It's dense. It's like a Nexus 10. Was a Nexus 10 an 11 inch or 10 inch? It's a 10 inch device. Same or similar resolution, 25 by 16. This is Tegra 4 powered. So it'll be interesting to see what its performance levels are. We have NVIDIA Shield. We know what Tegra 4 can do. I'll be curious to see how Tegra 4 in that form factor compares to Tegra 4 in this form factor, and then what the dock and battery adds to that. So that's kind of an interesting device. Again, no pricing or availability on any of these things announced by ASUS. And finally, the ASUS Zenbook X301, X302. Who's interested in these? Anybody? Anybody?
Only if I can find one under my seat.
So Corning Gorilla Glass, that's a feature to put on the box. 13.3-inch laptops offered in 2 resolutions, 19 by 10 or 25 by 14. So a 2560 by 1440 13-inch screen with Haswell hardware in there. How's that sound?
Good.
Expensive.
It's probably not going to be that cheap. That's correct. 802.11 AC support, Bluetooth 4.0, USB 3.0. One of them will have, looks like they're going to offer, Ken was telling me actually that the lower end model, the one with the 1920 by 1080, says it has an optional GeForce GT 730M, but that may be a Europe only, not America option. That's just mean, ASUS. But the top end SKU with the 25 by 14 display looks like it's going to have Iris Pro graphics. So we want to get one of those in to test. ASUS, if you're listening, we would love to be able to test Iris Pro graphics again and see how it frame rate that bitch as it would be. That's a thing.
Yes.
I like the idea. This is the one where they put the glass on the outside as well, right?
You mean on the back?
Yeah, on the lid. On the back of the lid?
Yes, they are proud of the design, proud enough to cover it, the top of the lid, with a layer of Corning Gorilla Glass 3 to protect it from scratches and gouges.
So I like the idea that it will make it so that the aluminum doesn't scratch, because it definitely does on the Zenbooks, but it's going to fingerprint like crazy.
We will protect the metal with glass.
You could always wipe things off with a cloth. You cannot buff out scratches.
Yeah, but who wants to
guess.
sit there and buff the lid of their Zenbook? I mean, come on.
He said buff
Let me finish.
no. No.
But now you can get the look of it without scratches. So it's really cool looking. Like these Zenbooks have slowly evolved from their first generation, I think, to being much better devices than they were initially. So I'm excited to give this a shot. Let's see. Thickness wise, these are Ultrabooks, so it gives you an idea of what their thickness is going to be. 1/4 pound lighter with this generation. So 1.38 kilograms versus 1.5 kilograms. Both models are listed with a 50 watt-hour battery, which is a lot of battery. So hopefully that's a lot of hours. Pricing and availability, guess what?
Not available.
Not available. Please contact your ASUS representative for more details.
Permanently delayed.
Permanently delayed. All right, so anybody else have any news they want to throw in at the last minute before we get to our hardware software picks of the week?
No.
No? All right.
My bladder's full.
That's not news. That's expected.
Right. If you drink less during the show,
Then I become less interesting.
well, no argument there.
Yeah.
What kind of drinking game does Josh play?
Have a drink. What do I win? Another
It's called
beer.
Drink the Beer.
All right. My pick of the week is actually memory. Usually this is Josh's pick of the week. But I happen to have some here. This is some G.Skill Ripjaws Z. And here, let me actually... I have the packaging right here. So these are the Ripjaws Zs. These are, it says compatible with Z87, but here's the secret. It's actually compatible with anything that uses DDR3 memory. We were using this. We're going to use this on our upcoming Ivy Bridge E and overclocking testing because this is DDR3 2400 speed memory, 16 gigs of it to be exact, 4x4 gigabyte modules, $169 for 16 gigs of memory, and there are reports circulating around the world that memory prices are going to skyrocket, and it's going to be $900 million for every kit. So if you're looking to buy memory, now would be a good time. And getting 16 gigs of really high-speed stuff. This isn't DDR3 1600. If you want that speed, you can get it cheaper from G.Skill and other guys like Corsair. But for the high-speed stuff, $169 for DDR3 2400. So give that a look. Who's next? Jeremy, you got something? Jeremy, you're muted.
Yeah, I know.
There you go.
Apparently, the fact that I breathe, some people find disturbing.
I do.
It's true. It almost makes you sigh, doesn't it? Yeah. Anywho, carrying on. I've been a long-term supporter of SETI at home, and I'm sure that a few of you have noticed that. But they've just come out with a new client which will run on ARMv7. So essentially, if you've got an Android device, you can actually now download SETI at home and run it on your phone. Because, you know, who wants battery life?
Exactly. Because
It could be fun
I
to
want 2 hours on this, max a day.
Well, guess what? Now you can join all the cool kids and pull the recharger out all the time. So anytime you walk into a pub or a room, it's like, oh, where's the outlet? I need to charge my phone. But it could be fun, you know? If you've got an Android device that is sitting there doing nothing, because honestly, how often do you use all the cores on that thing? Give it a shot.
Okay. I hope my
So now what you're telling me
Galaxy
is
S4
everyone-
finds the aliens.
Yeah, everyone's Android is going to find aliens.
And then you can phone them.
Computer's taking over. Who knew? Josh, you're up next.
Me. You
Yes,
know,
you.
we haven't talked about this card in a while, but it's still a really good one. It's the HD 7870. Now you can get it for under $200. So if you want a really nice gaming card, even though it says $219.99, well, it's $199.90 after rebate, and plus there's more things that you can typically find. Plus you get 2 free games with purchase, limited offer.
What game?
I like the 7870. It's
You get to
fast.
pick, Alan.
Oh,
What?
isn't that sweet?
It's the Never Settle Forever bundle. Where you get to pick
Forever.
those 2 games. It's a good idea. I like it.
Yeah. You know, I
It's a
reviewed
silver
those a while
reward
back.
card. It's a silver
They're still
reward
fantastic. Bye.
card. Buy.
That's expensive.
It's free if you don't buy it. Think about it. Alan, you're last.
All right, so Windows 8.1 is sort of floating around-ish, or it will be soon, and that might be enough to get people to finally take the plunge from 7 or whatever you may have been running, maybe ME, I don't know. And if you decide to do so and you totally hate that whole, boxed whatever that silly page is, what is that thing called with the boxes on it? The
Metrosexual?
tiles. Yes, Metro. That's
Boxes.
crap. If you don't want to see that ever again, and you actually want the start button to be there, first of all, which I know 8.1 sort of brought it back, but you can make it look like the real start button with this. And if you actually want to start menu, instead of the little tiled Metro thingy, there's an open source thing called Classic Shell. At least I think it's open source.
I don't know.
It's free. And
It's on
it's on
SourceForge. Yeah.
So it's open source as well, and the recent beta versions do a very good job of faithfully reproducing the Windows 7 start menu, right down to the functionality of just typing to search for stuff, and it shows up in the, within the start menu. You can go back to doing your start and right arrow and enter to do like a quick shutdown kind of thing. Everything works as if it was Windows 7. And it totally gets rid of Metro. And you can go in and configure it. It has a whole bunch of configuration options. You can make it so if you click on the start menu, it'll actually do Metro. Or if you control right click on the start menu, it'll give you that right click menu that you normally get for Windows 8. So you really don't have to sacrifice anything.
Why can't Microsoft do this?
Because the open source people apparently can do it better. So,
They don't want to admit defeat?
Yes.
I don't know, but this does a really, really good job of it, and I've been testing it out in a VM, and it's probably
Is this what you use
now.
on our machine now, Ken? Yeah, Ken's using this too.
Uh,
It's okay. It's not quite exactly like Windows 7.
Sure, it's necessary.
the only stuff that's not
as
like Windows 7
necessary.
is if you go into one of the things that used to be like a control panel little mini applet in Windows 7, like if you search for one of those and you launch it, it'll launch the, as if it was a Metro app. Which is how some of the Windows 8 stuff just is. It's how they coded it. So there's no way around that. But everything else, I haven't really seen anything that's different.
Yeah, it's
Really?
fine. It's fine. It's free. It's fine. I wouldn't recommend people buy one of these things. I don't think the Metro interface that I use, I have just base Windows 8 on my machine. I hit start. That stupid menu comes up. I type some things. I hit enter. It goes away. Boom, I'm done. I never see the Metro interface. So if this is free,
with
that's
a
great.
name like Classics, hell, all you'll be doing is reading Tale of Two Cities over and over again.
Sweet.
Yep. Well, I love how I've seen Windows XP machines made to look like Windows 7. Windows 8 machines made to look like Windows 7. I've never seen any machine made to look like Windows 8.
Windows 8.
And they're usually modded to not look like Windows 8.
Well, shit happens, I guess. That's going to do it for this week's episode. If you want to watch us record this live, it's interesting, it's fun. You get to see all of our screw-ups at the beginning, all the magic that gets cut out of the middle as well. You can see that at pcper.com/live. We record it there Wednesdays at 10 p.m. So if you're here next Wednesday, whenever you're listening to this, the upcoming Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, you'll be able to watch us live. pcper.com/podcast is the URL. You can find all the previous downloads to find the RSS file to subscribe to the audio. You can go to youtube.com/pcper and watch all the videos we make there, in addition to the video version of our podcast. And I guess that's it. Next week's going to be IDF, so I may not be on the show. I don't know. We'll see. Last year is IDF where I made those clips that I submitted that wasn't IDF?
No, those were toenails.
That was my toenails. Oh, interesting. So we'll figure out something for next week. It's IDF week, which means I'll be out in San Francisco. And I guess that's
But are
it.
you going to San Francisco?
You'll never be able to flit a flower in that hair.
No, but I hear there's a lot of good people out there.
Bye, everybody.
You know you can't be lazy.